This morning, the committee is joined by Ambassador Tai to discuss the trade agenda for the year ahead. The Biden administration from the get-go had a difficult job to do with respect to trade. The Trump administration's chaotic approach turned some of our trade rivals into outright adversaries and many of our friends into rivals. Now the United States needs to kick into a higher gear with a smarter, more innovative approach to trade, which will deliver real results for American workers, farmers, and businesses. There are certainly big issues to address. For example, China continues to put up barriers to American products and American values while ripping off jobs using forced labor and undermining free speech. Its discriminatory model, and I think my colleagues know this, unfortunately is spreading. Even our allies in the European Union and Canada are drafting laws intending to limit our digital companies' ability to do business in their jurisdiction while shielding their own companies. Today, I'm going to briefly outline a three-part strategy to get more Americans back in the winner's circle of trade. First, the administration needs to ramp up enforcement of the trade laws that are already on the books, and that means enforcement across the board. Let's start with USMCA. Senator Brown and I fought for stronger, faster-acting enforcement tools like the Rapid Response Mechanism. That is part of what makes the USMCA the most pro-labor trade agreement in American history. Ambassador Tai has used the Brown-Wyden mechanism to get some key wins to stop labor violations in Mexico, and she's worked to help Pacific Northwest dairy farmers get into the Canadian market. Now they have to go further and enforce every provision of every chapter of USMCA. For example, Mexico is flouting its USMCA obligations by shutting out our renewable energy providers. Bad news for the economy, bad news for the environment. During last year's trade agenda hearing, I asked Ambassador Tai to take action. The U.S. did request consultations with Mexico in July 22, but 8 months have passed. American clean energy producers, our companies in the Pacific Northwest, are still waiting for access. In my view, it is long past time to say enough and to make this a real dispute settlement case. The administration also needs to set up enforcement beyond USMCA to defend American workers and businesses from unfair trade practices wherever they are happening. To that end, the administration hasn't yet brought a single case before the World Trade Organization. There is no doubt that the World Trade Organization needs reforms, but if you don't press your case, we're stuck on defense. And I want to make it clear, and I think colleagues agree with this, the United States of America has got to play offense on international trade. Next, the administration makes opening export markets a priority as an issue. This is an imperative in terms of the administration's agenda. USMCA is proof that U.S. trade policy can raise the bar on labor and environmental standards and bust down the barriers to our exports. However, I have real concern that USTR isn't doing enough to break down barriers our exporters face. For example, there is just old red tape preventing Eastern Oregon potato farmers from shipping fresh potatoes into Japan. Oregon potatoes are the very best in the nation. And I intend to give my friend Senator Crapo equal time in order to make his case with respect to his agricultural sector. But kidding aside, we're talking about an estimated $150 million market. Pacific Northwest apples and pears are blocked from the behemoth Australian market. Oregon wheat, upwards of 90% of what's exported, suffers from high tariffs in markets around the Pacific Rim. Vietnam has a litany of restrictive digital practices that hurt our startups. The administration ought to be taking every opportunity to fix these issues, but it's not even clear that USTR is discussing them as part of the whole effort with respect to the Indo-Pacific framework. So I want to draw a line here. The United States cannot conclude agreements with Japan, Indonesia, or the EU that leaves issues facing our exporters, American exporters, without remedies. Third, getting trade done right is going to require creative approaches to new challenges. Whether it's shoring up our supply chains, promoting access to critical minerals, or addressing climate impacts of leading industries, smart trade policies have to be part of the solution. I'm glad Ambassador Tai and her team are thinking outside the box, but what's needed here are real answers on how these proposals are going to work in practice. The administration has to deliver new markets. We're talking about, say, the Middle East and Africa, and trade in new products, say renewable energy and digital services, in a way that quickly pushes the American economy forward. Meeting that challenge requires that we strategize with our allies and we partner with the Congress. It's going to bring me to one last point. The executive branch, in my view, has begun to embrace a go-it-alone trade policy. And I want to be clear on this point. Congress's role in U.S. trade policy is defined by the Constitution of the United States. It is right there in Article 1, Section 8. It is black-letter law, colleagues, and it's unacceptable to even offer the argument otherwise. It's my expectation that Ambassador Tai and the committee can begin to chart a new path forward when it comes to transparency, consultation, and ultimately approval of trade agreements. I also want to commend Senator Menendez of New Jersey for his leadership in the effort to promote these transparency reforms. Ambassador Tai, thank you for being with us today. We look forward to this discussion. Senator Crapo, who undoubtedly will have views on his potato.